So Jesus and his disciples were passing through from Judea into the region of Galilee, and along that path they had to pass through Samaria. They came upon a village, and on the outskirts of this village was the well that in the Old Testament Jacob built and gave to his son Joseph. The disciples were very hungry when they got to this village, and so they went in to get food. Now Jesus was tired from the journey, so he sat down at the well and waited for the disciples. In the meantime, a Samaritan woman came out of the village to draw water from the well about noon. And when she got to the well, Jesus asked her, he said, "Can I have a drink?" Now this was odd in these days, and the woman's facial expressions definitely reflected that, because Jews and Samaritans did not interact. So the woman says, "Sir, you are a Jew. Why are you asking me for a drink?" And Jesus responds by saying, "If you knew who I was, you would be asking me for a drink, and I would give you living water." Now the woman is very confused. She doesn't understand what's going on, so she says, "Sir, you don't even have a bucket, and this well is very deep. How is it that you come to get this living water? Do you think perhaps that you're better than our ancestor Jacob who gave us this well?" So Jesus responds by saying that everyone who drinks from this well will be thirsty again, but those who drink from the living water that I offer will be satisfied forever, and they will never thirst again. The woman is very excited about this living water, and she says, "How do I get this living water?" And Jesus responds to her by saying, "Go into the village and get your husband." Now the woman responds by saying, "Sir, I have no husband." To which Jesus responds, "I know that you have no husband. You're right in saying so. You've had 5 husbands, and the man that you are with now is not your husband." The woman is astounded by the fact that Jesus knows her past, and she says, "Sir, you must be a prophet." So then she asks him a theological question, a spiritual question. She says, "Now the Jews tell us that we're not allowed to worship because the only place to worship is in Jerusalem." And Jesus responds by saying, the time has come, the time is coming, and is now here, when who you are and where you worship will no longer matter. The only thing that will matter is worshiping simply in spirit and in truth. When you come simply and honestly before God, those are the only things that will matter. So unsure of where Jesus is going with this, the woman replies, "I don't know what you're talking about, but I do know that the Messiah is coming, and when he comes, he will make these things clear to us." And Jesus responds by saying, "I am he. I am the Messiah that you speak of. You don't have to wait or look any further, because I am he." Now the disciples return to the well at the perfect time to see this interaction taking place, and you can see from their facial expressions the fact that they're not happy that Jesus is talking to this Samaritan woman. So the Samaritan woman gets up and excuses herself from the well, and she leaves her pot of water empty at the well to return into the village. Now, when she goes into the village, she starts telling people about this astounding experience that she's had at the well with this man. She says, "Come and see this man who has told me all that I've ever done. He knows me from the inside out. Do you think that he could possibly be the Messiah?" Now, the people in the village are very intrigued, just as she was, and they begin to leave the city to find out for themselves who this man is. Now, back at the well, the disciples are still a little bit out of the loop as to what's going on. And they begin to ask Jesus if he's hungry, if he wants food. And Jesus responds by saying, "I have food that you know absolutely nothing about." And the disciples wonder, who gave Jesus food? We didn't give Jesus food. Who gave him food? And Jesus begins to clarify by saying, "My food that I am fed by is doing the will of the Father who sent me and fulfilling that will." He looks around and he points to the fields surrounding the well, and he says, "These fields will be ripe for harvest in a few months' time." But the fields are ripe for harvest here in Samaria. The harvester is gathering up the grain that is ripe for eternal life. It's harvest time in Samaria. Now, at this time, as Jesus is saying this, Samaritans are coming out of the city, out of the village, to see Jesus and see who he is, if he is who he says he is. And many believe and commit themselves to Jesus at this time. Jesus stays in the village for 2 more days, and over the course of those days, many more people believe in him because of the woman's testimony. This story is often referred to as the Samaritan woman or the woman at the well. It is found in the Bible in the book of John, chapter 4, verses 4 through 40. Now, I have a question that I would like to ask you upon the telling of this story, and that question is, what other questions might someone have about Jesus and who he is after hearing this story for the very first time?